Welcome back. It's been a huge week for iPhone Fold chatter. But a fresh leak just shifted the spotlight to something a lot of people actually upgrade for every year. The iPhone 18 Pro design, a well-known Weibo leaker, digital chat station, has posted new information pointing to two possible design changes. Apple is still testing for the iPhone 18 Pro, meaning the final look may not be locked in yet. And if these updates are accurate, the biggest question is simple. Are we finally getting a smaller dynamic island, or is Apple about to play it safe again? Let's break down the latest iPhone 18 Pro leaks, what they mean, and why this could be one of those years where Apple's small changes end up being the most noticeable ones. First up, the dynamic island. 4 months. Multiple reports have suggested Apple is experimenting with moving some Face ID components under the display on the iPhone 18 Pro. If Apple pulls that off, the cutout area at the top of the screen wouldn't need to be as large, leading to a dynamic island that could be around 35% smaller than what we're expecting on the iPhone 17 Pro. That would be a big deal. Not because it completely reinvents the iPhone, but because it directly impacts the thing you look at the most, the display. A smaller dynamic island would mean a cleaner screen, more usable pixels, and a more futuristic look, especially if Apple is inching closer to the long-rumored goal of a truly uninterrupted front display. But here's where the leak gets interesting. Digital Chat Station previously pushed back on the smaller dynamic island rumor. He claimed that while a mini dynamic island might have been Apple's original plan, Apple was also considering reusing last year's screen molds, basically sticking with existing manufacturing tooling, which would likely mean minimal changes to the dynamic island. And now, he's back with an update that suggests Apple is still deciding between two different approaches. According to his newest post, supply chain feedback points to an A/B testing situation. In other words, Apple may currently be evaluating two versions of the iPhone 18 Pro design. Option A, keep the existing screen mold, meaning the dynamic island would remain mostly the same. Option B, introduce a mini dynamic island by placing the Face ID or X components beneath the display. That single detail, A/B testing, is the key takeaway here. It suggests Apple hasn't made the final call yet, and both designs are still on the table. And if Apple ultimately chooses the safer route, the current screen mold, then the smaller dynamic island could disappear entirely from the iPhone 18 Pro rumor list. That would remove one of the most exciting potential visual upgrades people were counting on. Now, let's talk about the second leak, the rear camera design. In a follow-up post, Digital Chat Station responded to a question about the iPhone 18 Pro's back camera layout. His answer is pretty straightforward. The rectangular camera plateau design is expected to stay the same as last year. So if you were hoping Apple would dramatically redesign the camera bump again, this leak says don't count on it. However, he adds an important note. The back of the phone is still expected to get minor adjustments specifically to the body materials and small design details that may sound boring, but it can actually matter a lot in real life. One of the rumored goals for Apple is to create a more uniform, seamless look across the aluminum and glass areas on the back. Recent designs have leaned into a two-tone aesthetic rather than a perfectly blended finish. These minor adjustments could be Apple's way of refining the build so that transition between materials looks cleaner and feels more consistent. And yes, color options are expected to change as well. So even if the overall camera layout stays familiar, the iPhone 18 Pro could still look noticeably different in hand, especially depending on finishes, tones, and how Apple tweaks the edges, coatings, or panel integration. If you zoom out, this leak also matches Apple's usual pattern. When Apple introduces a bold new design direction, it typically doesn't follow it up with another dramatic redesign the very next year. Instead, the next generation tends to focus on iteration, small refinements, improved manufacturing, subtle material upgrades, and just enough visual change to distinguish the new model without disrupting the production pipeline. That's exactly what these iPhone 18 Pro updates sound like. So here's the real story right now. The iPhone 18 Pro design is not finalized. Apple may still be deciding whether it's worth pushing under-display Face ID components far enough to shrink the dynamic island, or whether it makes more sense to stick with the current display mold for cost, yield, and production stability. And on the back, the big camera plateau likely isn't going anywhere, but Apple may still tune the materials, the feel, and the finishing to make the device look more premium and more cohesive. Now the big question, would a smaller dynamic island actually matter to you? Because for some people, that single change could be the visual upgrade that makes the iPhone 18 Pro feel truly new. For others, it's the kind of spec sheet detail that won't change how they use the phone day to day. Either way, keep an eye on this rumor, because if Apple chooses the mini dynamic island path, it could be one of the most obvious iPhone 18 Pro design upgrades we've seen in years. And if Apple doesn't, then this might be a year where the iPhone 18 Pro is defined more by subtle refinement than bold design.